This was not how her adventure was supposed to unfold. Josie Duggar was initially introduced to the world as a small, frail infant who had been born several months early and spent her nights in a hospital in Arkansas, where the sound of machinery and cables interrupted the silence. Every breath was a miracle, and every beating held hope. Her parents prayed for her for hours on end. It was uncertain if she would live to celebrate her first birthday, but she did. Josie, the survivor's child and a live example of how faith can overcome any obstacle, was the family's living miracle. She was never simply another Duggar kid as she grew up. She provided comfort to the family. She was a symbol of strength and fragility to the globe. Her smile always looked to have been captured in a moment, like a tiny fragment of heaven itself. But beyond that radiant smile lay something invisible. The unsaid burden of having to constantly break expectations and becoming the epitome of perfection. She was raised in a rigid, unruly household. The parents were kind, but they were also quite committed. Every choice and goal had to align with the family's values, beliefs, and public persona. Josie has absolutely no issues. She was grateful, nice, and obedient, but occasionally, she pondered what it meant to lead a life that was genuinely her own. Through her bedroom silence. Then Zach arrived. He wasn't a shooter, that's true. He came from a lowly background. He was more well known for his modest demeanor than his name. He quietly went about his business in a tiny town not far from Fayetteville. At a church youth event, he met Josie by chance. There, they grew closer in their faith while having fun, singing hymns, and bonding. She was like any other little girl to him, timid, gentle, and exuding a purity he could not quite place. He caught her attention not because he was physically appealing, but rather because he treated her like a real person, not simply a cute little TV kid or another Duggar. They began with a brief discussion on the Bible, giving, and the future. But over time, they developed into something more profound. The rebellion did not occur. There was no prearranged plan. It was straightforward, genuine, and pure. Josie was struck by a sensation she had never experienced before. Independence, and separation from her family. She didn't need to be flawless, strong, or possess the fabled miracle in order to be with Zach. That might be Josie. But love was difficult because of her family's situation. It included approval, a schedule, and rules. Reactions were swift as rumors started to circulate that Josie, the youngest and still very young Duggar, might be falling for someone. Her parents were taken aback by the news. The protective measures taken by her siblings startled the outer world. The whole world, please. There is a lot of criticism on social media. It's not correct. He is taking advantage of the situation. She is too young. No one was aware of her true feelings. The nights of solitude and introspection went unnoticed. In a prayer, she asked God to validate her intuition. Zach did not move. He didn't argue with her. He sat next to her and did nothing. He gently but firmly reminded her that relationship characteristics like patience, faith, and respect were more important than her age or her approval. He was relaxed. She would be happy to give him anything he desired. Josie cried for countless nights. Despite her inexplicable feelings for Zach, she was deeply devoted to her honor, her family, and her values. She was afraid of disappointing others. She prayed she wouldn't come out as confused or disobedient. Her heart was still beating though. The next months saw an increase in tension. Her mother tried her best to protect her. Her father prayed for clarity for her. The world missed crucial details because the cameras were still not rolling. Josie's spirit was generating a maelstrom that only she knew about. She felt calmer after seeing Zach, and she began to question whether God had predestined their love story. She started composing private letters that she didn't want anyone to see. She allowed them to reflect her concerns. I would rather not cause harm to anyone. I can't pretend, though, that my feelings aren't telling me what I need. Perhaps it's not that bad when love is sincere. Perhaps they are simply misinterpreting it. With those words, she prayed. Her parents' lives were completely upended when they learned about her letters. Sobs were heard. Long conversations, concern. But just fear, not anger. They were afraid she might leave them. Control is lost, and the ideal family is no longer visible. Listen up, Josie asked herself. She seemed to be crying. She said a sacred phrase. All I want is to love with the courage, faith, and honesty you taught me. She muttered quietly at the conclusion of it all. Those words caused a silence to descend across the assembly. Her parents recognized their little miracle had grown up at this moment. She had transformed into a lady of conviction rather than one who rebelled. That's where the hatred persisted. The internet was unkind, as though she were a nickname rather than a person. Her value was contested by doubters. Zach, however, was dependable. He would respect her family, write letters, visit her quietly, and never cross the line. Over time, something started to change. His patience was evident to her entire family. It was obvious that he was not hostile, threatening, or using foul language. He merely loved Josie with a tenderness that reflected their religious beliefs. Josie, the young woman famous for surviving childbirth, was now going through an even more difficult situation: the humiliation of a society that was unable to comprehend her emotions. Still, she was silently becoming more powerful. She recalled every prayer uttered over her crib, and even as a newborn, she paid close attention to her mother's discussions about faith and purpose. Perhaps this love was a continuation of the amazing person she had always been, not a mistake, but a necessary part of her mission. Josie stood at her window and gazed at the skies as spring arrived. While she was in the hospital, her parents would frequently pray outside under the stars. After that, she muttered a new prayer. Right now, the objective is peace, not survival. If this affection comes from you, don't get involved. Remove it carefully if it isn't. She had a feeling. The quiet, tiny voice of assurance that life is more than just fear. Josie Duggar was no longer a wonder to the world after she closed her eyes. That night, she became her own. She had no idea what the rest of the world would say. She had no idea how arduous the trip would become. She was certain about one thing, though. She would rather be misunderstood for being honest than commended for her deeds. This was the beginning of a tale that would challenge religion, family, and what it meant to be brave. The tale of a young lady who dared to love in spite of all the obstacles in her way. For Josie Duggar's sake, the miracle was never happening. It was devotion. Calm evenings were short-lived. What started out as murmurs quickly became into waves as quickly as Josie could keep up with the quick spread of posts, rumors, and headlines. Everybody had a viewpoint. Everyone expressed their opinions. The amazing baby was caught in a tempest, and she had no control over it. They referred to her as reckless. As a result, his reputation suffered. With each word, a wound was inflicted on her soul, not her body. She had grown up in the spotlight, acclaimed for her innocence, and loved for having survived. However, those identical eyes suddenly had a sour and suspicious appearance. Her love was filthy and sinful in their eyes. They saw her decision as treachery rather than bravery. Josie felt totally alone in a sea of people for the first time. Her family was attempting to protect her from the mayhem. Her mother, Michelle, pleaded more vehemently than ever for direction. Her father, Jim Bob, paced the floor at night, divided between his fear of losing his daughter and his love for her. The best was what they sought. Still, the adjective best had become ambiguous. Josie's top priorities were harmony, love, and honesty. However, she put her family's security, appearance, and authority first. Conversations that were laced with sadness rather than rage filled the quiet nooks of their house. Josie could never have disobeyed her family's wishes. She only wanted her voice to be heard. Zach also respected their personal space by keeping his distance even if he didn't want to. He was not provoked into retribution by the press. He chose to remain silent rather than publish, debate, or defend. Instead, he put in more effort, prayed more fervently, and showed a remarkable level of patience that would cause most men to break under its weight. He was aware that this was a test of his character rather than a battle against others. No matter how hard he tried to keep quiet, the noise always got louder. His life was investigated by reporters. Interviews were conducted with former friends. She turned all of his minor transgressions into evidence that he wasn't worthy of her. Josie endured it all. The nasty remarks, the fabricated stories, and the posters calling her lost, stupid, and uninformed. She also broke down in silence. She would lock herself in her room every night, cup her hands over her face, and tell herself that if she would only remain faithful, everything would be all right. While everyone else is screaming, Faith feels vulnerable. Her siblings made an effort to reassure her. In a letter to her, Jana stated that peace comes from truth rather than approval. Johanna sent romantic texts, and Jinger called. Their encouragement did nothing to quiet the clamor in her head. Josie once stepped out onto the porch, the same porch where her parents had filmed family get-togethers for TV. Why is it so hard for me to act morally when my heart tells me it should? She muttered to the sky as the far hills trembled with the sound of thunder and the aroma of rain. The breeze made no noise at all. It was a stirring in her heart, although it was faint and shaky. When she recalled Zach telling her, "We don't shout louder to prove love. To demonstrate this, we stand for a longer amount of time."